gang. Again, something a little different today. For whatever reason, I don't see very many Guild solid bodies around here. Again, there might not have been a dealer nearby back in the day, or maybe they just were made in smaller numbers, so it's a quirk of probability. But the Guilds I have seen, I've liked a lot. This one happens to be an S60 from 1978. That's the second year of production for this model, which is essentially like Guild's version of a Les Paul Jr. Let's take a quick step back. In New York City, get a rope, in the immediate aftermath of the Second World War, there lived a certain man, named Alfred Drong. Alfred owned a music store, he did repairs. In the early 50s, he decided to enter a partnership with George Mannon, who was an Epiphone guy, pretty high up in the organization. Epiphone went through some big changes in the 50s before they were acquired by Gibson. They moved their entire production from New York City to Philadelphia. And a lot of their workforce, being staunch New Yorkers, stayed behind. And, you know, a new guitar company, why, you tell your father you can get that Guitar Works for a song, and all the labor he needs too. Half the guitar makers in town were thrown out of work when it closed. So yeah, they started with experienced employees, and they were making some big old hollow body jazz guitars and having a good time. As it turns out, Guild 2 would quickly leave the state. In 1956, they moved to Hoboken, New Jersey. Less union influence or something. It turned out to be a pretty good move for them. In the early 60s, they were ready to enter the solid body market. First with the S100, which looks darn close to a Gibson SG. I mean, their bodies are very similar, except the bass side horn is a little bit longer. It's kind of like offset. They also made the S200, which is the one that looks like a melted chocolate bar. And it has the built-in guitar stand that folds out from the back. Wonderful idea. In 1977, a new body shape arose. It's this pretty fantastic design. I like it a lot. There are hints of Rickenbacker about it, maybe a touch of Explorer. And there were several models with this shape, from bare bones to ultra deluxe. This is the student model, essentially. Got your one bridge pickup. Everything's kept very simple. These ones have maple necks and a mahogany body, which is sort of what Gibson was doing at that time too. Some of the upper end models were made from ash. I think the natural finish ones, like the S300. But they came in lots of colors, black, white, sunburst. This is cherry. It's very attractive. You could buy one of these with either the HB1, which is Guild's standard humbucker, which is a pretty clear, bright, not super high output pickup, or you could get the model S60D, the dual version, which came outfitted with two DiMarzio Strat-like single coils. What would you choose? So it's a 24 3/4 inch scale, like a Gibson. This one has a rosewood board. Some of the upper end models came with ebony. It's interesting, the headstock has no facing on it, there's no veneer, and there is a gold decal which is under the lacquer, which is this pigmented cherry, and it's virtually unreadable unless you've got a light raking across it, but it's there. It says Guild. This has a factory installed roller bridge, which is a very nice thing if you want to maybe install an aftermarket vibrato system. There's not a whole lot of neck angle on these guitars, so a Bigsby might not be your best choice, but certainly a Maestro, if you had one of those kicking around, would do. Provided you don't mind getting rid of what is one of the more defining visual characteristics of these guitars, which is this honkin' big slab of metal, chrome plated and screwed to the face to act as the anchor point for the strings. It's really neat. Inside are special tiny little organisms which produce sustain as a byproduct of the respiratory cycle. So I've got to do a bit of a setup on this thing, see what we can get out of it. And the pots are apparently very crunchy. I'll need to apply some strings before I do that, because they're an integral part of that whole setup process. Figure out where things are. Just going to do a little bit of a cleanup here. I tend not to do a whole lot of cleaning on the guitars. You've noticed this, I'm sure. I figure it's like taking your car to a mechanic. You know, they're not detailing it when they're working under the hood. But if there's serious crust buildup here and there, I'll break out the naphtha. Naphtha is of course sold as a lighter fluid. You can also buy painters and varnish makers naphtha, which tends to be a bit stronger, from places where you purchase paint, house paint, etc. It is a good solvent for guitars because it does not affect the finish on most factory produced instruments, and it's pretty good at removing stuff. This is one of those instruments where everything is contained on the pickguard, except hopefully the ground wire for the bridge. This one is held down with 11 billion screws. Not only is there a ground wire, but it's nice and long, so I can turn this thing over without worrying about tearing it off. It's about as simple a circuit as there can be. And yeah, a little bit of oxides on that tone pot. Unfortunately, it looks like they covered over the date codes on both pots with solder. So this jack is super wiggly in the hole in the pickguard, but also it has lost much of its spring, and it's not really holding the barrel of a jack very nicely at this point. Sometimes we can bend this inwards and try and re-establish that, but it's loose enough that we're just going to go ahead and replace it with a pure tone. This is a double sprung jack, a spring on either side of the barrel, which really locks it in position, and they're pretty much bulletproof in my experience. And if someone's having issues with a jack, it's like 9 times out of 10 it's a no-brainer. Just put one of those in. They're not very expensive for what they are. Got a piece of bus wire here. Cold solder joint too, I imagine. That can wiggle right out. Without even heating it up. That's easy. The barrel on this pure tone is a little bit longer than the original, so I want to make sure there's enough room to use it in this cavity. There's plenty of space down there. I'll go ahead and add a second nut and a spiked washer to go under the pickguard. This will take up some extra room so we don't end up with, 3/8 of an inch of barrel sticking out in front of the guitar. I want to position this so that the tab that goes to the inner sleeve of the jack is on the correct side for the ground wire, and the one that goes to the tip of the barrel is positioned on this side for the hot wire. I use my moderately heavy-duty soldering iron or soldering iron, and I want to get both parts heated up nicely. The way the solder will flow and give us a good connection. The end product should be shiny, not globular, kind of streamlined looking. Okay, just clip away that little bit of extra from the hot lead. You could, if you wanted to, put on a piece of heat shrink tubing or something there, but in this case there's no way that it's ever going to contact the jack springs. It's fine. Let's do a quick cleanup of the face here. There's a lot of this white dust inside, which is overspray from the finishing process, which is never cleaned out. Higher end models from Guild usually had copper lined shielding inside. Then oh so many screws. Turn them backwards a little bit before you go forwards to let them fall back into their threads. That way you're not going to strip them out. Also, don't tighten any one screw completely fully until they're all in. Give yourself a chance to move the guard around a little bit if necessary. If these guitars have a weak point, I would say it's probably these tuners. The upper end models had Grovers. These 3 in a plate, I believe they were Japanese made at this point, but the base plate is sort of brought up and hooked around rather than fully surrounding the shaft here with the gears. They tend to be kind of finicky at best. We'll see how well we can make them work. I'm just going to put a little bit of oil on any of the friction surfaces. Next question, should I polish these frets now or later? I think I'll do it now. These frets are essentially the same that Gibson was using on their Les Pauls in the 70s. They're about 104 thousandths wide and usually fairly short. These are okay. This is actually 31 thousandths. 29 thousandths. So, 26 thousandths. So they are inconsistent in height, but that probably has more to do with the dressing of the board. Yeah, we get actually quite short in the center of the board, and it starts coming up again as we go towards the body. But somewhere between 25 and 30 odd thousandths on average. So, not tremendous amount of wear. I'm going to clean him now. The board surface felt pretty dry, so I'm applying some lemon oil, which doesn't actually hydrate it in the sense that you're putting water in, but it just prevents more moisture from coming out for a short time and makes it look shiny. And I put a bunch on the surface, let it sit for a minute, and then just wipe off any excess. Simple. I'm going to do a little bit of finish touch-up here. A couple of different ways of doing this. You guys know I don't do very much of this. It's almost 50 years old. This guitar has natural kind of wear patterns and stuff. This is a marker. This happens to be a Winsor & Newton Pro marker in burnt umber, which in this case is actually kind of cherry-like. This guitar was finished in lacquer. There is a sealer coat underneath it here, so put a little bit of that on there, clean it up, and the obnoxious lighter marks go away. Again, like, don't bother doing this, man. This is normal wear for a guitar of this age. It looks fine with that. Same thing here where the arm goes. I mean, this is the way they look. Then of course there's this very characteristic wear on the top rear of the headstock where it's rested against walls or other surfaces. This is so ubiquitous on old guitars. If it's not there, we start asking questions, you know? If you're looking at a Gibson from 1964 and it's missing and everything else looks appropriately aged, maybe we get out the black light or start examining the headstock to see if it's been refinished and where the break was or where the overspray begins. So this is kind of normal. This kind of damage on the back of the neck is also pretty normal, where it was rested against tables, etc. But depending on the thickness of the finish and the sensitivity of the hand, this can be really annoying to some people, where the finish is flaked away, especially if the edges are kind of deep or sharp. This spot actually, the large one, is not so bad to me, but these ones here, I can definitely feel those. They're kind of sharp. And so we're going to do a little bit of touch-up work on here just to make sure that these aren't going to grow any larger. The other alternative that some people do is just, get out the sandpaper block and sand all the finish off the back of the neck and maybe apply some oil. There are people that is their preferred thing. There are people who do that to brand new guitars. But in this case, we're going to try and save the lacquer. Matching this color over top of this deeply oxidized mahogany is probably not going to happen, but we can seal it up, that's for sure. I start off by trying to clean this really well. I really scrub at it for a little while. I mean, that's delightful, but it's part of life when you're dealing with instruments. So I'm going to use some 600 grit sandpaper just on the surface here, because this is still sort of oily with hand residue, even after all that cleaning, and it's very smooth. 600 grit is actually maybe too smooth for this job. Yeah, I feel better with 220. Up next, a little coat of shellac in the bare areas. I'm going to seal those up. If some gets on the surrounding surface, that's fine as well. Most of that will be sanded off. I got a little bit of this Heritage Cherry Red from our friends at Oxford Guitar Supply Company, not a sponsor, but they make good stuff. And I've sprayed a little bit of that into paper cup here, and I'm just going to use it on the surface with a brush rather than spraying it. This is going to provide a drop fill that's a bit more localized, and I'm not going to end up darkening all of the finish, which is currently now the right color, by adding more on top of it. And I'm just going to paint that in with a brush, and this dries pretty darn fast, obviously, but I can build it up in thin layers if necessary, and I can even thin it down. It's just a convenient way of dispensing the material without having to mix up fresh stuff. Just a little spritz in the spray can will do. And this is functioning sort of like a liquid toner. The shellac acts as a barrier coat. Lacquer sticks pretty well to shellac. Everything sticks well to shellac, basically, and shellac sticks well to virtually all the other finishes. So it's kind of a universal sealer slash barrier coat in between clear coats or color coats and that sort of thing. Okay, that's my first coat. I'm going to go darker than that, but I just want to let that dry before I do. A couple days have gone by, and now I'm doing some drop fills with super glue on top. I could continue just using lacquer, but the fill would be so deep that it would require about a month to get dry enough to properly level. And the super glue is ready in a day. I just use thin glue, sort of paint it on. I try to slightly overfill the dips and then scrape back using a single edge razor blade, going around the neck like this, flattening those out and leveling them. Between coats I can block sand with some 1200 grit paper on a flat block. I use some buffing compound and hand rub it to a shine. Again, 50-year-old guitar, not looking for showroom factory finish, but I want it smooth and want it to feel nice on the hand. There we are, still visible but much less palpable. Got some strings on here. I'm looking at it, and it seems to me that every single one of these strings is contacting the back lip of the bridge. It's actually bearing down on that, which is not great. And coincidentally, on this side, there's a convenient cutout every single space, which suggests that this bridge is on backwards. Now, it might be on there for a reason, due to either string spacing or just, the ability to intonate. Well, we got to put it on the other way around, because I do not like that. It's not the easiest thing to remove on the fly. You have to take out the studs. It's pretty grungy. I'm going to put it in the jewelry cleaner. The little rollers don't want to roll. Let us decant the tin. It requires a little bit of penetrating oil. You thought I was going to say it, didn't you? String to string spacing could definitely use a little bit of adjustment. And happy days! There's enough room to adjust for intonation on every string. Neck relief proves abysmal at more than 25 thousandths of an inch. I'll pop off the truss rod cover to discover factory paint still on the truss rod nut and a whole lot of buffing compound. Yet another guitar that's been living its life with a completely loose truss rod. That's 3 in the last week. The depth of the nut slots was fine, but the width of the high E and B was not good. They were much too wide, and the strings could slide sideways back and forth, making a kind of pinking noise if you were going to bend the strings. So I put some bone dust in there, applied some thin glue, and recut the slots to the correct width. Well, there we have it, friendly folks. All ready to play. I like that the neck is not tiny. It's 1 5/8, but it's got some heft to it. I like that there's a good amount of tone adjustment. And though I didn't measure it, I'm pretty sure that they used like a 47 capacitor rather than a 22, which is not the usual humbucker combination, right? It's like they took a little bit of the stridency out. It's still a bridge pickup, but there's a good sweep there. You can get quite mellow with it if necessary. The neck radius on this is tight. It's 7 1/4. I've got it set up at 4/64 on the base, which is about 1.5 millimeters, and slightly less, 3.5 on the treble, and it plays nice and clean. You can bend on it. Did any of you notice that this is a 24 fret guitar? You don't see that very often in this era. So you can strum it gently at a campfire, or serenade a baby at a christening ceremony, compose radio jingles, virtually any musical endeavor. The Guild S60.